History loves clean stories. It loves a king in a bronze helmet, a narrow mountain pass, and a final stand that feels almost divine. For centuries, Americans have heard the same legend. 300 Spartans facing 1,000,000 Persians, led by a man who chose death so freedom could live. But peel back the polished myth, and what you find isn't a hero out of a Hollywood script. You find something far colder. Leonidas was not merely the king who died at Thermopylae. He was the architect and the survivor of the ancient world's most calculated murder machine. Long before a Persian spear touched Spartan bronze, Leonidas had spent decades enforcing a system that legally permitted the slaughter of an entire population, the helots, Greece's own enslaved underclass. Every autumn, the ephors declared ritual war on these men and women. And every year, Spartan youths, fresh from the brutal Agoge, hunted them across fields and villages. This was not war, it was extermination, wrapped in the language of tradition and stability. For every Spartan citizen, 7 helots were killed to maintain the illusion of order. Understanding Leonidas means understanding a society built on fear, a place where children were taken from their mothers at 7, where compassion was beaten out of boys until only obedience remained, where the state survived by crushing any spark of resistance before it could ignite. And 3 unanswered mysteries define the real man. Why did the helot revolt of 490 BC end in such silence? Why did a skilled commander, fully aware of his escape routes, choose certain death? And what exactly happened inside the Krypteia, the secret killing corps Leonidas both endured and ultimately commanded? To find the truth, you must step into the cold Spartan night where this story truly begins. It is December 490 BC. The moon hangs low over Laconia. Snow dusts the rooftops of farmhouses. And somewhere beyond the torchlit fields, a mob of desperate helots gathers, convinced that, at last, their rebellion might break Sparta's iron grip. They are wrong. Leonidas, still a young prince but already trained to kill without hesitation, moves through the darkness with a squad of silent warriors. No speeches, no mercy. Only the quick efficiency of men shaped by a system that rewards brutality the way others reward honor. This is the night Sparta learned it could never allow Leonidas to simply live. It needed him. As its perfect weapon, Leonidas's rise did not begin in a palace. It began in a barracks that smelled of sweat, cold reeds, and children trying not to cry. He was 7 when Sparta claimed him not as a son, but as raw material. 2 armored officers pulled him from his mother's arms. The bronze plates on their chests reflected her horror back at her, distorted by torchlight. Leonidas never forgot that reflection. In Sparta, forgetfulness was weakness, and weakness was death. The Agoge did not shape warriors, it erased children and rebuilt them as weapons. Nights were spent on reed mats thin enough to leave marks on the skin. Hunger gnawed every rib. The instructors watched boys fight over scraps of food like animals, then punished them not for savagery, but for lack of skill. A boy who stole well survived. A boy who didn't was beaten until he could no longer stand. And then came the story every Spartan knew. The boy with the stolen fox. He hid it under his cloak during inspection. The fox panicked. Its claws tore through flesh. Its teeth dug into muscle. But the boy didn't scream. He let the animal chew through his stomach rather than confess. The instructors called it excellence. Modern psychologists would call it trauma engineered for obedience. At 12, the boys received mentors, grown warriors who molded them through methods Sparta never wrote down and historians carefully sidestep. Whatever kindness these men once had died long before the children arrived. But the final crucible came at 18, the Krypteia. The most promising were armed with daggers, sent into the countryside, and ordered to kill helots in darkness. No hesitation, no questions, no mercy. Leonidas returned with 17 kills, a number the instructors marked with quiet approval. and a subtle note. He does not flinch. Not long after, the mad king Cleomenes was found dead in prison, the cuts on his body arranged in a pattern no suicide would choose. And the third son, the spare no one had bothered to fear, ascended the throne. His first decree was simple, chilling, and entirely Spartan. Persia grows stronger. Sparta must grow harder. The Agoge became harsher. The Krypteia spilled more blood. And the boy who had once been stolen from his mother now commanded a system designed to steal childhood itself. Leonidas had completed his transformation. The lion's son had become the perfect weapon. Long before the world heard the name Thermopylae, Leonidas was already building the force that would die there. The truth is stark. He did not choose the strongest men in Sparta. He chose men who already had living sons, men whose bloodlines could continue even if they did not return. The requirement was not strength, it was replaceability. This was not a selection for victory. It was a selection for extinction with purpose. But here is the hidden calculation that never appears in movies or classrooms. Each Spartan was assigned 7 helots to carry supplies, maintain equipment, and serve in ways historians rarely describe. 7 men for every one. That means 2,100 enslaved people marched beside the 300 unarmed, unrecorded, and unsalvageable. The silence surrounding them was not an accident. It was the first step in ensuring they would never overshadow Sparta's story. While the larger Greek world debated Persia's growing power, Leonidas prepared for something entirely different. Archaeologists have uncovered weapon caches buried around Spartan territory dated precisely to 481 BC, hidden not for defense but for a last act of control. These were not tools for survival. They were pieces in a plan that demanded every part of the machine continue functioning until the final day. And then the oracle delivered a prophecy that sealed the design. Either Sparta will fall, or a Spartan king must die. To most men, such words would be warning. To Leonidas, they were instruction. By this time, the Persian Empire under Xerxes was assembling an army so vast that ancient writers simply called it the host that shook the earth. And while other Greek leaders scrambled to negotiate alliances and strategies, Leonidas shaped his response with the cold discipline of a man who had been taught from childhood that his life belonged to the state. He knew he would not survive the coming war. In truth, he had accepted that death years earlier. What mattered now was not victory, but how the story would be told and who would be allowed to tell it. Every man chosen, every helot assigned, every hidden cache, every unspoken order, they were not preparations for battle. They were preparations for a legend that required almost everyone involved to never return. Leonidas lied with the calm confidence of a man who had lived his entire life inside a system built on deception. To the ephors, he claimed he was leading a religious procession, a harmless ceremonial march, nothing more. But the truth marched with him. 300 Spartans chosen to die. 2,100 helots, unacknowledged but essential. And before long, 6,700 Greek allies, men from Thespiae, Thebes, Corinth, and Arcadia fell in behind them, believing they were part of a united stand against Persia. History would later wipe their names clean, as if they had never walked those roads or bled on those stones. The march north was deceptively calm. The Spartans sang battle hymns that carried across dust-colored hills. Helots trudged behind them beneath heavy loads, their faces set in quiet resignation. And to every village along the way, Leonidas projected confidence, not hope, but inevitability. But the psychological warfare began long before the first Persian arrived. At the hot gates, the place Greeks called Thermopylae, the Spartans behaved as if the coming storm barely mattered. They sat in plain view, calmly oiling their hair, stretching, training, moving with the relaxed discipline of men preparing for a festival rather than a war. When a Persian scout was captured, Leonidas sent him back. His message was simple, chilling, and precise. Tell Xerxes the sons of Heracles await. Then came the envoys. They offered terms that any rational commander would consider: land, autonomy, friendship with the empire that ruled half the known world. But Leonidas answered with demonstration, not debate, reminding the envoys exactly what Sparta considered justice, delivered with cold, theatrical precision. The message spread faster than any spear point. Sparta would not bend. During the war council, Greek leaders argued strategy, naval positions, troop allocation, the defensive value of the narrow pass. Leonidas listened, but he had already chosen the ground. He placed his 300 at the tightest choke point, guaranteeing they would meet the Persians first. And archaeology reveals a truth far more unsettling. Leonidas knew about the hidden mountain trail that could bypass the pass. He knew it could be used against him. He knew the Greeks could be encircled. He did not fear it. He planned around it. He perhaps even needed it. For the legend he intended to create required more than bravery. It required inevitability. Dawn broke over Thermopylae, like the opening of a great iron gate, slow, heavy, and final. The first rays of sunlight had barely touched the cliffs when Xerxes sent the Medes forward, confident his soldiers would simply overwhelm the narrow pass with sheer weight. Instead, they collided with something terrifyingly precise. The Spartan phalanx did not move like men. It moved like one engineered organism, a wall of bronze shields and 8-foot spears, advancing and withdrawing in perfect intervals. Every 15 minutes, a fresh rank rotated forward, stepping into place with flawless synchronization, as if the ground itself had memorized their rhythm. Behind them, the helots worked in a grim, silent choreography of their own retrieving fallen shields, handing forward replacement spears, pulling wounded men out of the formation while arrows streaked overhead. It was a support system designed for efficiency, not survival. Xerxes expected bravery. He was not prepared for trained inevitability. The Medes fell back in disarray. Then the Immortals, the legendary elite, advanced in shimmering armor that caught the sun like scales of a massive serpent. They had never tasted defeat. They expected none today. But the Spartans met them with the cold discipline of men who had been raised not to cling to life, but to meet death without blinking. Their movements were sharp, practiced, almost ritualistic. And when one Spartan finally fell, helots surged in behind them to fill the gaps, knowing exactly where to stand and how to keep the pattern unbroken. By noon, the narrow pass felt smaller, the sun hotter, and the air heavier with dust and sweat. Reports whispered through the Persian ranks, thousands of their own lost in the first hours. Meanwhile, Spartan casualties remained astonishingly low. But the helots, their losses escalated rapidly. For every Spartan who staggered back, 7 helots had already fallen, keeping the formation alive. They worked the wings, absorbed the missile volleys, and endured the chaos that raged beyond the shield wall. No chronicler wrote down their names, no inscription marked their part in what was becoming legend. And yet Leonidas understood the math better than any man alive. The pass was holding for now because he intended it to. But he also knew the truth the others refused to face. The moment the Persians discovered the hidden mountain path, the shape of the battle would change forever. And Leonidas had already prepared for that moment. The second day rose over Thermopylae like a punishment. The battlefield was a maze of trampled earth, shattered shields, and men who had fought far longer than any human should. The Persians advanced again, but their confidence had drained away with yesterday's losses. Many hesitated. Others stared at the narrow pass with the dread of men approaching their own end. Xerxes threw everything he had, Sake warriors charging with wild cries, Bactrian cavalry forced to dismount and push forward on foot, Ethiopian contingents under banners bright as flame. Nothing broke the line. The Spartans held the pass with the same unshakable rhythm they'd shown on day one, though now every movement carried the weight of exhaustion. Then the moment came that shuddered through the Greek ranks. Dorias, Leonidas's brother, a veteran respected even among Spartans, fell in the chaos of the push. One heartbeat he was fighting, The next, he collapsed, lifeless, his body taken by the tide of combat. The message spread instantly. Even Spartans could fall. For the first time, doubt flickered among the allies. But a far worse blow arrived from the mountains above them. A Greek, the infamous Ephialtes, revealed a secret path to the Persians, a narrow goat trail that bypassed the hot gates entirely. Scouts rushed back with the news. The enemy would soon surround them. Before sundown, the pass would be cut off. Every other commander would have ordered a retreat. Leonidas did not. He listened to the scout's report, and a strange, hollow smile crossed his face, the kind carved into a man by a lifetime inside the Agoge. He understood what this meant. He understood that the shape of the legend was finally unfolding the way it needed to. His orders were immediate and merciless in their logic. Dismiss every Greek who had not sworn to stay. Hold only those willing to die. Compel the Thebans to remain, for he did not trust their allegiance. And the final instruction, quiet, cold, ensured that no voices would survive to question the tale Sparta intended to spread. The Thespians, driven by principle or pride, volunteered to stay beside him. None realized it was a decision from which no dawn would return. That night, Leonidas gathered his Spartans beneath torchlight and spoke not of tactics, but of something far more seductive: immortality. To the helots he offered no comfort, only a command delivered with chilling calm: hold the wings and buy us time. Dawn crept over Thermopylae with a coldness that felt almost ceremonial. Before the sun fully cleared the cliffs, Persian trumpets sounded from 3 directions: front, flank, and rear. Encirclement was no longer a threat. It was reality. Leonidas had known this moment would come. He had shaped the entire last stand around it. The Spartans stepped away from the crumbling wall they had defended for 2 days. There was no confusion, no hesitation. The formation broke not in disorder, but in purpose. They surged forward with the intent of men who understood the math of their own extinction. If death was inevitable, then each second purchased must be used to its fullest. The battle transformed into something more chilling than desperation. It became a controlled sacrifice. The helots, placed at the wings, were overwhelmed first not by Persians, but by the very warriors they had served. Leonidas's order from the night before unfolded with ruthless precision. No witnesses, no survivors from the ranks Sparta intended to erase from history. The Thebans, sensing doom, attempted to surrender, raising their hands toward the Persian encirclement. They were struck down before they could take more than a few steps. And then came the final convergence. Spartans, Thespians, and the last loyal fighters closed ranks around the fallen body of Leonidas. His red cloak lay twisted in the dust, his bronze gear dented but unmistakable. The sight of their king on the ground turned the remaining warriors into a ring of iron resolve. They fought not just to survive a moment longer, but to deny the enemy the symbolic victory of claiming him easily. When spears shattered, they drew swords. When swords broke, they used their helmets. When helmets fell away, they used bare hands. Xerxes, watching from his elevated platform, felt a rare chill. His elite units were dying faster than he could replace them. The narrow pass was becoming a funnel that consumed his men. In frustration, and perhaps a trace of grim respect, he signaled the order that would end it. An arrow storm, a sky that dimmed as thousands of shafts ascended. A rain so thick it drowned movement itself. When it cleared, the hill was silent. Leonidas lay where he had fallen, his face turned toward the rising sun, a faint, unmistakable expression on his lips. Not bravery, not defiance. Satisfaction. For the legend he engineered was now unstoppable. When the final shouts faded across the hot gates and the battlefield fell still, Xerxes walked among the fallen with a bitterness he could not hide. The Spartans had resisted far longer than logic allowed, and their king Leonidas had become the axis of their defiance. In anger and frustration, Xerxes ordered something that broke both Persian and Greek custom, Leonidas's body was to be displayed and desecrated. A violation meant to humiliate, but it had the opposite effect. It transformed a dead king into a myth. Sparta wasted no time shaping the narrative. The truth of the battle, the thousands who fought, the allies who stood shoulder to shoulder for 2 full days, was far too complicated for the legend they needed. So the story was rewritten. The 7,000 Greeks who held the pass early on were reduced to 300 Spartans. The Thespians, who chose to stay, disappeared from the tale. The Thebans, forced to remain, were recast as traitors. And the 2,100 helots, who marched, carried supplies, and died alongside their masters, were erased so completely that most modern retellings never speak their names. Herodotus repeated what Sparta wanted him to hear. Plutarch decorated it further centuries later, and soon the legend became stronger than the truth. But the ground at Thermopylae preserved its own record. Archaeological digs revealed class-segregated burials, the honored graves of Spartans placed apart from chaotic pits containing everyone else. Some remains suggested a far more complicated and unsettling picture than the heroic version carved into memory. Multiple mass graves circled the battlefield like silent witnesses. Meanwhile, the machinery that created Leonidas the Krypteia continued long after he fell. Year after year, it devoured the enslaved population until Sparta hollowed itself from within. By 371 BC, the once feared military state collapsed under the weight of its own brutality. It had destroyed the people it depended on to survive. And yet the myth endured. Romans praised Spartan discipline. Renaissance thinkers admired Spartan sacrifice. Modern militaries study Thermopylae as a model of courage. Hollywood resurrected the 300 and forgot the thousands who died unnamed. The truth is colder. Leonidas was precisely what Sparta designed him to be. An instrument shaped for violence, whose final act ensured that thousands would never speak. Some monsters lurk in shadows. Some wear crowns. And some are remembered as heroes simply because no one survived to tell another version. That is the real legacy of Thermopylae.